Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching.
Hey you! Can't you see where you're going? Barry stopped the car outside the store. He was a couple steps short of the grocery store. But a speeding car drove by and splashed in with muddy water from a puddle. What kind of people? With a little profanity to go along with it, Barry looked at his ruined suit and couldn't find the right words. How am I supposed to show up at City Hall looking like this? Did you happen to memorize the number? He turned to his son. What a lousy town this is. People in our town are more cultured and don't behave so brazenly on the roads. Barry tried to shake the dirt off his suit with his hand. He didn't have time. Don't worry, we'll stop at the mall and get you a new suit. We're not going back, Osborne reassured his father. It was pointless to postpone the visit to City Hall. Today they had to sign a contract for a turnkey construction project. For the sake of this contract, they have already traveled 200 kilometers. Osborne would not delay the meeting with the mayor for the sake of a dirty suit. Osborne would realize later that day. Up there, upstairs, someone wanted this fateful meeting to take place. They stopped at the nearest shopping center. They went up to the second floor and just popped into the first menswear department. A girl came up to them, a girl who looked very much like the one Osborne had lost long ago. He'd been looking for her for a long time, but Hillary had disappeared without explanation. She had simply left him, most likely for another more successful young man. Ignoring Osborne, she offered them a choice of several suits for business meetings. She took them to the fitting room, and while they were choosing, she disappeared in an unknown direction. Osborne would have rushed after her without even thinking. He watched from the side as the girl slung the strap of her handbag over her shoulder. She exchanged a few words with the cashier and hurriedly left the department, without even glancing in his direction. Isn't that her? It's so similar. The gait, the facial expressions, the smile. Osborne thought to himself, remembering their last meeting 6 years ago, when Hillary, without explanation, packed up and left without even saying goodbye. The search for her was unsuccessful. Her parents remained silent. Her friend shrugged her shoulders in surprise. There's certainly been a change in her appearance. From a shade, she has turned into a searing brunette. If earlier she practically did not make up, now there is a new makeup on her face. She looks, of course, flawless, like she doesn't even wear makeup. The girl was completely indifferent, looking at Osborne as if he were a complete stranger. Of course it looks very similar, but it was probably not her. Osborne reassured himself. When his father, already satisfied with his appearance, stood at the cash register and paid for his new suit, Osborne plucked up the courage to ask the girl a question. Tell me please, the girl who was next to you recently, isn't Hillary by any chance? That's correct, Hillary. That's our manager. She owns the store, the clerk answered with a smile. She handed Osborne the bag in which she had packed his father's dirty suit. Without wasting another moment, they exchanged pleasantries and hurried out of the store, figuring in their minds that Hillary would be here tonight to collect the proceeds. Osborne sent his father home, and at 5 p.m. he was already circling the department. When he saw Hillary, Osborne walked purposefully into the store. He decided that today nothing would stop him, and he would finally find out the reason why she had left him in the most shameless way. Hillary, hello. Don't you recognize me? Seeing her cold stare, Osborne felt a fever without a fever. From her expression, he realized that of course she recognized him, but she didn't show it. Have I changed so much that I'm hard to recognize? He heard a voice that sounded painfully familiar. You look better, he said hoarsely, confused by the surprise. It was only now that Osborne noticed a boy of about 5 years old standing beside her. He was standing next to Hillary, digging into his cell phone and paying no attention to the people around him. Son? Osborne smiled, noticing at once that the boy looked a lot like Hillary. It's obvious that he's not a daughter, she replied unfriendly. How old is he? What do you care? There is a doubt that if he does not want to say the age, it could be his child. And why not? What's your name, boy? Osborne addressed the child directly. Without taking his eyes off the phone, the boy answered. Albert? Albert, how old are you? 5. The child mumbled idly. It will be soon. Hillary clarified. Mom, have you forgotten how old your son is? I was already 5. He got off the phone and looked at his mother in surprise. Where's your daddy? My dad left me and my mom before I was born. Did he, Mom? Albert looked at Hillary, waiting for her to confirm his words. Osborne choked, squatted down in front of Albert. Maybe your mama left your daddy. Stop talking nonsense, she raised her voice. Hillary remembered the day Osborne had invited her to the movies. He was waiting for Hillary outside the theater. But just before she left the house, Elizabeth came in and tearfully asked him to leave Osborne alone. She roared like a beluga, said she was expecting a child from him, asked for mercy and not to leave the child without a father. Osborne, losing all patience, waited for Hillary first near the box office, then waited on the street. He called her countless times, sent her messages, but Hillary didn't answer a single call or read a single message. Unable to stand it, he ran to her house, hoping that Hillary didn't show up for a very good reason. But her parents said Hillary had left without leaving her return address. She broke the Simca in front of her parents, throwing it in the trash. Osborne was ready to jump on the wall out of anger, trying to understand and unravel her cunning, and no one understands her move. Elizabeth was a shoulder to lean on during that difficult time. For 3 years she was always by his side, diligently helping him to find the girl he loved, tried to get to his heart, and always said that she would never do that to him. Osborne's heart trembled, and 3 years later, he and Elizabeth played a wedding. God never gave them children, though. Hillary, you realize I want to know the truth, right? I'm not going anywhere until I know the truth. Osborne couldn't take his eyes off Albert, trying to get a good look at him. Uncle, why are you looking at me like that? Osborne opened his mouth for a moment, wanting to answer, but couldn't find the words. He turned his gaze to Hillary. From her worried face, he understood everything. Albert's words about Dad leaving them were echoing in his head. My son, is that really true? What if it isn't? And I made it all up. His brain was melting from the information he had received. Osborne stood up, sighing heavily. His whole body clenched from the pain in his chest. It was hard to breathe. He realized that now was the moment when one careless word could hurt Hillary, and he might not learn anything again. He would lose her again and never find her again. The main thing now was to get Hillary to talk to him. To talk. Find out why. Maybe even the bitter truth that his wife always told him and she really never needed him. Osborne held out his hand to Albert. I invite you to the entertainment center. I'm sure you'll like it there. Albert's eyes lit up and he looked at Hillary. Mom, may I? Hillary nodded her head in agreement. Uncle Osborne, is there a playroom where we're going? Mom, will you buy me an ice cream cone? Uncle Osborne, how long have you really known my mom? Osborne answered all the questions and smiled. The happy smile never left his face. He didn't know why, but Osborne had grown attached to Albert. He liked answering all his questions, seeing his smile, and just being around his wonderful child. He stopped the car near the new entertainment center. Albert pulled them into the play area. Osborne noted to himself that the boy had been here before and more than once. The young girl took Albert's hand, assuring the parents not to worry and nothing terrible would happen to their child. All the children are supervised and their son will spend his hours at the entertainment center with great pleasure. Instructing Albert to behave himself, Hillary calmly let him go with the girl. Osborne took her hand and, surprised that Hillary didn't push him away, took her to a cafe near the game room. Osborne ordered and then looked at her face with pleasure. Still unable to believe his eyes, he tried to tune into the conversation, and thanking the chauffeur who had poured the muddy puddle over his father. It was a pity he hadn't memorized the license plate. Osborne would have found him, kissed him on both cheeks, and thanked him for a good drive. Is Albert my son? The question that was on his mind most of all came out of his tongue. Hillary lowered her eyes, shrugging her shoulders. She was about to answer no, but Osborne suddenly covered her hand with his. Hillary flinched and looked into his eyes in surprise. As they rode in the car, she had gone over several options in her head and had settled on the only one that was right, and decided not to interfere with his marital happiness with Elizabeth. But now the word yes came out of her mouth. Yes, Osborne, Albert is your son, but that doesn't mean anything. You have a family. Elizabeth loves you. You'll have children of your own. Osborne undid the top button of his shirt and loosened his tie. His chest heaved with injustice at how she could do such a cruel thing to him, and even now trying to manipulate him. Why did you disappear and not tell me you were having a baby with me? I was looking for you like a fool, not realizing anything. Waiting. Osborne stammered. He took a sip of water. It didn't seem enough. He took a few more sips. Why bring up the past, Osborne? He heard Hillary's voice. Are you seeing someone? I mean, a man, a husband, a loved one? Osborne said those words, but he was sure he wouldn't let anyone else raise his son. I have no one. You have Elizabeth. Hillary bit her lower lip in thought. Osborne took a wait-and-see attitude, but Hillary remained silent. I've been waiting for you for 3 years. I was hoping that you would come back and explain everything to me. I'm waiting for your explanations, Hillary. What's to explain? That day I was going to the movies with you. Elizabeth came running and crying, begging me to leave you alone because she was expecting your child. And you believed all that bullshit, without even talking to me? Hillary, where's your brain? I never slept with her. He stopped, swallowed loudly. I started seeing her after you disappeared. It was 2 years, and then we were married. Osborne clarified. Remember that time I caught you in the restaurant? You were kissing. And then we had a fight, and you didn't come to see me for a week. Elizabeth told me you were with her all week, and then you made up with me and then you left her abruptly. Osborne slammed his hand down on the table with anger. Lies. Quiet, don't shout. There are people around. People are already looking back at us. Hillary looked around. Osborne, behave yourself. Hillary, believe me, nothing happened between us back then. I swear on my health. And I've told you before and I'll tell you again. That kiss was an accident. She kissed me as a joke. I was surprised and shocked by her action. He put his hands around his temples and started rubbing them. They sat in silence for a while, staring at each other. Then Hillary spoke softly. Now you know everything. I didn't want to tell you about my son. But as it happened, she furrowed her brow and sighed heavily. Let's not tell Albert you're his father yet. You're going to leave now, and he's going to bombard me with questions I can't answer. That's out of the question. All right, Hillary, that's enough. You've made a mess of things already. How dare you hide your son from me? I've always loved you, and I love you now. Osborne flushed. He clenched his fists in anger at his wife, Hillary, at what she had done. And even now he's trying to do what she wants to do. Don't forget you're married. I'm not gonna come between you two. Did Elizabeth know you have a son? He interrupted her. Osborne was not going to listen to any more of this nonsense. He looked at Hillary intently. She turned away, barely holding back her tears. Osborne's eyes darkened. I'll kill her. He understood without words. She's a monster. She's an abomination. How could I have bought it? With his hands in his hair, Osborne couldn't say another word. To realize that all this time he'd been living with a woman who'd lied to him. Lying without remorse and yet appearing to be a calm and loving wife. It was disgusting and even disgusting. Hillary stood up and gestured to the time. It's time to pick up Albert. You stay here. I'll go get him myself. No, I'll go with you. Don't forget he's my son too. Osborne called the waiter, said a few words and hurried after Hillary. Mommy, Uncle Osborne. He ran right up to them. Hillary thanked the girl who had accompanied him and took her son's hand. Osborne also held out his hand. Albert did not hesitate to give him his own. Albert was overwhelmed with emotion. He choked and swallowed his words and told about his new fairy tale journey. Osborne listened with pleasure, smiled and wondered together with him. He asked questions, which Albert answered with pleasure. They drove up to the house about 10 o'clock in the evening. Uncle Osborne, come and visit us. I'll introduce you to my grandmother. Osborne looked at Hillary questioningly. He didn't want to leave his son. Osborne had already imagined in his mind that they were one happy family. Will you come in? Hillary hoped he would refuse. If you'll let me. Osborne exhaled loudly and noisily, realizing finally that he probably had no rival. If he did, Hillary wouldn't have invited him over for a night out. The cats were scratching at his soul again. They scratched at his soul with such force that it became unbearable to think and breathe. If Elizabeth hadn't put a stick in his wheels, he would have found Hillary in no time. But Elizabeth was always there for him, going to her parents, calling her grandmother. She'd come up with the answers and give him the information she wanted. Good evening. Osborne cringed under Suzanne's gaze. It was hard to make eye contact with this sweet grandmother. Good evening. She looked at Hillary in surprise. But Albert turned his attention to himself, talking for the third time about where they'd been and what he'd been doing at the rec center. That's it. Grandma stroked her great-grandson's head. She glanced at Osborne and smiled at Albert, listening to his confused story. "It's late. Let's run to the shower and go to bed." Susanna Petrovna left Hillary to socialize with Osborne. She barely got Albert to bed. He kept trying to play with Uncle Osborne, tried to get Granny to show him her toys. Then he asked Uncle Osborne to read him a story. He only calmed down when Osborne came into his room. He agreed that tomorrow he would pick him up with his mother from kindergarten and they would go out again. Osborne went into the kitchen. Hillary stood with her back to him and looked out the window, mentally setting herself up for the most serious conversation of her life. Osborne opened his mouth, but his wife called him. He dropped the call, then dropped the second, third, fifth. Without thinking, Osborne put the phone on silent, but Elizabeth didn't calm down and called Hillary. "Elizabeth is on the phone. What can I tell her?" "Nothing. Put her phone on the blacklist." Osborne wrinkled his face in squeamishness. Talking to his wife didn't fit in with his plans. "I can't do that, Osborne. How does she know you're with me?" "My father, I think." "That's even better. Let her prepare herself thoroughly. Let's see how she turns herself inside out this time. Don't think about her. Let's talk about us." Osborne took her hands in his. "Tell me about your life. How have I been?" Hillary grinned. "At first I was very angry with you. Then I found out I was expecting a child. I wanted to get rid of it, but my grandmother wouldn't let me, saying it was a big sin. I graduated from university by correspondence, but I didn't go to work by profession. I opened my own store. My parents helped me. My grandmother gave me all her coffin money, said she wasn't going to die anytime soon. Didn't you ever want to tell me about your son? When Albert was born, I was still single. I really wanted to, but Mom said she sees you with Elizabeth all the time, and Elizabeth called me and said you two were in love. I didn't want to put you in the position of having to choose. I knew it wouldn't be in my favor. It's all my fault. I'm filing divorce papers tomorrow. We don't have children. Thank God. They'll divorce us quickly. Let her look for another sucker who will tolerate her double standards. I can't even see her." Osborne didn't get home until the morning. He sat in the car for a long time. He calmed himself down and set himself up for a long and productive conversation. "Where have you been?" Elizabeth ran out into the hallway as soon as she heard the creak of the front door. Her eyes sparkled with hatred. A crooked grin contorted her face. "Don't you have a clue? As far as I know, you can anticipate every move I make. No matter how much you pretend, your deceitful nature is out in the open." Osborne tried to look calm. "I wanted to grab her by the scruff of the neck and throw her out the door." "We have IVF tomorrow," Elizabeth said softly. "We spent so much time on tests," she continued. "I'm not interested anymore." Osborne waved his hand and turned away. Even so, Elizabeth remembered how Osborne had dreamed of having a child. He had asked her just to give birth, and he would carry her in his arms for the rest of his life. And now that he knew he had a son, he's just gonna cut her out of his life. He's gonna go off to Hillary and she's gonna be alone. "Oh no, let's see you go to your lovely Hillary." "Well, it's a good thing we had insurance just in case. We turned it in early and froze his stuff. Let's see how you feel when I tell you that you're going to be the father of our child. This time it's gonna be fair and honest. I'm the luckiest dad. I have a son. I need to share this news with my dad right away." Osborne slumped on the couch in his suit, staring at the ceiling and just daydreaming. This news was on the one hand happy. On the other hand, it was like a blow to the head, and then it was indescribable delight. What a pity that his son was not born in marriage, as it should be. It's imperative that we make things right. Give Albert his own name. Introduce him to his relatives. Grandma, Grandpa. Go take a shower. You're sickening to look at. Elizabeth wrinkled her nose in squeamishness. She didn't want to look at the happy face of her beloved husband. After all, everything was so good. Why did he go to this Mukhosrensk? Couldn't her father have signed that unfortunate contract himself? Damn him? Elizabeth was sure that Osborne had coped with his sick love for Hillary. After all, Elizabeth had separated the couple and loved territorially in different cities. She had no idea that they would go to this rundown mall and her husband would meet his beloved Hillary. "Osborne, think carefully about your behavior. You have nothing to reproach me with. So Hillary said something stupid. I'm sorry. But I had no idea she'd do that. And I was there for you the whole time, supporting you. Osborne, I love you very much and I love you now." Elizabeth struggled to find the words to justify her actions. Well, why don't you say something? Don't forget that I was young and stupid then. I didn't realize what I was doing. Let's take an hour nap. I have to be at work in the morning. Leave me alone. Don't touch me. Don't make me angry. Osborne closed his eyes and remembered his son's happy face and smiled. He'd never been that happy, unless it was when he was a kid, when his parents bought him a whole carton of ice cream. Brought it home and delighted Osborne to no end. I forgot to warn you. I'm filing for divorce today. There's no point in dragging it out. I'm not going to live with you. I want to always be with my family. You should see what a handsome and intelligent son I have. Osborne sighed and shook his head. Have you said everything? Keep a close eye on your Hillary. She'll be on the run again. It will take another 5 years to find her, maybe more, hissed Elizabeth and grinned. Osborne opened his eyes. When he saw his wife's unkind face, he choked several times. Pack your things and leave. I do not want to live with you under the same roof. If truth be told, I'm even afraid of you. See a psychologist, or better yet, a psychiatrist. Get a referral. You need to have your head checked. A normal person wouldn't think of such a thing. You'd be lying. You'd be getting a cheap price. Don't even think about it. I'm still your wife and I'm not going anywhere. Not yet. Osborne put his finger up. It's a matter of time. He grinned. I hope you heard me, Elizabeth. Be reasonable. I've been having trouble hearing you lately. Elizabeth could hardly hold back her tears. Everything was fine, and suddenly there was this impenetrable wall again. She wanted to break through it, remove it and start over. Elizabeth sighed heavily, but decided to keep silent. There was no point in arguing with her husband. Elizabeth, let's have a quiet divorce. Come on, she said, and Osborne choked with surprise. Are you serious? He shook his head in surprise, not believing his own ears. I'm dead serious. We're doing IVF with you and I'm letting you go. You can go to Hillary's house, go to the ends of the earth. All I want is a baby from you. We've been going at this for a long time. I can't just quit halfway through. My dream is to become a mother and give birth to a healthy child. Elizabeth, let's not joke about this. I don't need this anymore. I have a son. Having a baby alone without a husband. You expect me to come to my senses and not file for divorce. I think that's too stupid. Osborne grinned. I figured out your cunning plan. For the sake of our old relationship. Osborne, think about it. I'll agree to a divorce at once. No. The answer was emphatic. It's out of the question. The receptionist calmly explained the obvious to Elizabeth. He and I signed the IVF consent form together. What else? My husband can't make it to the procedure today. That's why we froze his material. My husband is a very busy man. Embryo transfer is signed by both spouses on the same day. We'll have to reschedule. Maybe your spouse can make time and come with you next time. In case of emergency, you could get a power of attorney from a notary. Let me sign it. You saw perfectly well that your husband agrees to IVF. Elizabeth opened her handbag. She took out a puffy envelope. Here you are, take some candy for the children. A little present for my husband and me. I hate bureaucracy, especially with so little risk involved. My husband is sure he has all his papers in order. Elizabeth's fingers were trembling with excitement and the envelope in her hands was shaking. Wiping her tears, she handed the envelope to the girl. Elizabeth, I don't even know what the right thing to do is. All right, I know your husband agrees. Sign for him. I hope Osborne Igorovich won't kill us for this. Don't even worry. My husband will be very grateful to you. He's worried and praying for a positive outcome. All right, all the bureaucratic hurdles have been cleared. Now let's go to the OR. The girl took the envelope and put it in the desk. I hope my labors will not be in vain. Elizabeth looked at her doctor with a pleading look in her eyes. It happens. Some people come to us several times. I hope that I can do it right the first time. Elizabeth crossed her fingers for luck and went into the operating room. Hello, hello. Osborne, this is the IVF center. We've changed our minds. My wife and I are getting divorced. Osborne interrupted the receptionist. We understand, Osborne. Don't worry, no one will do the procedure without your consent, the girl reassured him. Did she come to your center without me? Don't worry, Osborne. Everything's under control. I hope so. Osborne exhaled. Thanks for calling. He hung up. They're getting a divorce. The The husband said he didn't want it. That's what I thought. The doctor grinned and shook his head. Don't forget to give her the envelope back. The doctor sighed heavily and walked briskly into the operating room. Elizabeth, I'm sorry, but without the written consent of your husband, we can do nothing. The doctor, with a guilty smile on his face, spread his hands. It seems to me that for his signature, I generously thanked your clinic. Or did you think that's not enough? Did you decide to make more money off me? I don't understand why we're having this conversation. Elizabeth tried to control herself, but the situation was starting to get out of hand. She had already given them a lot of money. Did they really think it wasn't enough? Her eyes glistened involuntarily and she blew her nose. The doctor handed her a napkin. Please go to the receptionist. She will explain everything to you. The doctor shifted his gaze to the uncomprehending nurse and left the operating room with a quick step. I don't understand. Elizabeth pulled the cap off her head with trembling hands. If they ask for more money, we'll have to go to Osborne, and he's not likely to agree to that. He's spending his funds on other people now. Elizabeth shrugged, remembering Hillary. What happened again? She turned to the receptionist and turned her gaze to the envelope that lay safely on the edge of the table. Elizabeth, the thing is, we can't help you. We've contacted Osborne. You don't have to go on. That's what I thought. Elizabeth grabbed the envelope. A wry grin appeared on her face. It was very difficult to cope with her growing sense of irritation and nervousness. Her mood was changing with every word she uttered. I hope this is the whole amount. She waved the envelope in front of the receptionist's nose. You insult me, Elizabeth. We have everything under surveillance. Goodbye then. She defiantly unzipped her purse and carelessly tossed the envelope into it. Good thing John made me call her husband, Sarah thought to herself as she looked at Elizabeth. That sneaky woman. Osborne pounded his fist on the table with all his might. The father looked at his son in surprise. Osborne, what's wrong? The clinic called. Elizabeth came in alone for IVF. Well done for calling. He loosened his tie in one movement. When is she gonna calm down? What if you believed her and didn't call? She loves you. Her father tried to stand up for his daughter-in-law. Dad, don't start. You're doing it again. The matter is settled. I filed divorce papers this morning. Thank God we have no children together. Osborne grinned. Dad, you've got to meet your grandson. We went out together again yesterday. We've got to do something. I can't go there every day. I can't do it without them. Yesterday, I made a pitch to Hillary about moving. She wouldn't even let me finish. She's got her grandmother, she's got a business. She doesn't want me to tell her son that I'm his father. Osborne looked at his father thoughtfully. I want to see my grandson myself, but I have my doubts. Is the child yours? His father raised his left eyebrow and looked at Osborne. It's mine, it's mine. I believe Hillary, and the timing is right. I'll have it analyzed to reassure you, but I don't care what it says. I'm going to marry her anyway. Albert is my son. I felt it instantly the first time I saw him. Osborne smiled at his father with his trademark dazzling smile. Osborne turned his head at the noise in the waiting room and was disappointed to find that the office had been entered without knocking. Loudly clomping her heels, Elizabeth slid in. She burst in like a fury and interrupted the conversation. Speak of the devil. Osborne cursed quietly. You should knock. He made a disgruntled face. He didn't want to see his wife lately. Elizabeth is a beautiful woman, no doubt about it. Legs from the ears, a beautiful face, breasts at her. She was pleasant to look at. There were no outward blemishes. But compared to Hillary, she was a total loser. Hillary might be shorter and her legs might not be as long, but she was his Hillary. Osborne caught himself thinking that he had never felt a special sexual attraction to his wife. Why he had married her, he could not understand until now. Elizabeth defiantly pushed back her chair and sat down opposite Osborne. Tell me, what have I done to you? I've been running after you like a mommy all my life. You're the only one I've ever lived with. Daddy, you have to feel sorry for me. Put some authority on him. When Hillary showed up, your son didn't even notice me. She's slipping. She's pulling a handkerchief out of her pocket. I want you to leave me a piece of yourself. I have served you faithfully all my life. She dropped her head on the table and burst into tears. Father grabbed a decanter from the table, poured water into a glass, and approached his daughter-in-law. Elizaveta, calm down. Drink some water. He gently put his hand on her shoulder. Dad, you know how I dreamed of the child. She took a sip and put the glass on the table. It's done. So much nerve, so much time. All Osborne has to do is sign it. She looked at her father with tearful eyes. Osborne laughed and clapped his hands together. Consider the concert for the viewer's requests over. Go pack your things. I don't want you in my apartment tonight. Were you hoping to suckle on me like a leech with IVF and suck my blood for the rest of your life? Didn't work out, so you decided to involve your father? No, you definitely need to get your head examined. Elizabeth, it's not funny anymore. You're becoming a danger to society. Comedy's over. My favorite woman will give birth to my children, but it's not you, Elizabeth. Your son left me because of that bitch. He won't talk to me. Won't sign the IVF consent form. He treats me like a filthy yard dog. Bitter tears were streaming from her eyes. They prevented her from speaking clearly. Elizabeth swallowed her words but continued to complain. I hate that bitch. I won't let her run my life. Influence and destroy everything I've built up with so much hard work. Don't you dare call Hillary trash. You better take a look at yourself. You're destroying everything in your path. Osborne cut her off in a tone that brooked no objection. I'm destroying? Right now, your dear Hillary has insolently meddled in our family. She gave birth to a child of her own, and she took everything away from me. Took away my husband and even my dream of being a mother. I hate her so much. Elizabeth was no longer shy in her expressions. Her face twisted into a contemptuous grin. You come anywhere near Hillary and I'll wipe you out. I warn you, if a single hair falls from her head, or my son's head, I'll make a chopped cutlet out of you, said Osborne with an impenetrable expression. But don't get your hopes up. There's no telling how your fate will turn out. Maybe Hillary has already found a replacement for you. It is better to pay attention to those who sincerely treat you. Notwithstanding, the father again decided to stand up for his favorite daughter-in-law. Barry had always been good to Elizabeth. He recognized her as a loving and faithful wife. Father, if you take her side, I'll never lay a hand on you again. Osborne rudely cut Father Osborne off. You go pack your things and move in with your parents. You and I didn't buy anything when we were married. There's not much to divide. My father owns the firm. The property issue goes away. There's nothing more to talk about. Hillary, please believe me. I want Albert to call me Daddy, and I want you to be with me always. Osborne looked adoringly at his favorite woman. Hillary could hardly contain herself from screaming, I do. Hillary had imagined and hoped many times that Osborne would find her. He'd come back with a big, beautiful bouquet of flowers. He'd beg her to forgive him, give her a ring. We'll get down on one knee and make a long-awaited proposal. Lost speech, learning that he has a growing son, and will constantly thank her for Albert. But her dreams remain unfulfilled. You have a wife. Hillary could barely hold back a tear. We'll be divorced soon. Don't even think about it. Elizabeth had already packed her things and gone to her parents. Osborne had a suggestion on his tongue to move her and her son into his apartment. But he held back. He didn't want to push his authority on Hillary. But Hillary is no longer the naive girl who looked Osborne in the mouth 6 years ago. She's a grown-up, self-sufficient woman. She's got her own life, and she's not going to let Osborne into her heart just yet. Why did you tell your son that Dad left you? Osborne asked the question that worried him the most. Didn't he? Did you want to justify yourself in my eyes? Hillary raised her eyebrows in surprise. Of course not. If you hadn't gone away. Osborne, let's not talk about what happened 6 years ago. How did you manage to marry a girl who betrayed you? If you married her, you loved her, and maybe you still do. Maybe I left so you could figure it out, which is exactly what you did. Hillary was unstoppable. The resentment came up to her throat again. Hillary took a few deep breaths to reduce the anger. I've always loved only you and never forgotten you. Osborne tried to make it up to her. It's noticeable, grinned Hillary. I want to make things right. We owe it to our son to be together. We don't owe anyone anything. Let's not rush things. I'm afraid that Albert will get attached to you, and you'll play father and disappear. Don't talk nonsense. I love you and I don't need anyone else. Let's go to my place tonight. I want Albert to meet his grandparents. How do you envision it? Just separated from his wife, and here we are with our son. I can imagine the surprised eyes of the neighbors. No, that's out of the question. At least not yet. Osborne could talk for a long time, but Hillary's demeanor made it clear that the conversation was over and there was no point in continuing. What a woman! Osborne thought to himself and decided to obey her. Oh, Elizabeth, what are you doing here? The neighbor on the landing stopped and looked at her from head to toe with undisguised curiosity. What has changed much? Became even more beautiful. Did you leave your husband? He slowly shifted his gaze to the bags. Can you help me carry them home? No problem. I'll do anything for you. Anything I want. Elizabeth remembered her mother's story that he divorced his wife. Now he lives with his parents and doesn't work anywhere. Will you help me take revenge on one insolent person who snuck into my family and divorced me and my husband? She did not take her eyes off, watching the neighbor's reaction. What do I have to do? The neighbor asked interestedly. It's not a big deal. Just a little scare. Just take her child and play with him for 2 days at your dacha, to make her realize that it is immoral and can even be very dangerous to meddle in other people's families. Elizabeth, it's a dangerous occupation. The neighbor started to deny it. I'll pay you well. She took out of her bag the envelope she'd gotten back at the clinic. I hope this will be enough. The neighbor took the envelope, twirled it in his hands, looked into it and whistled in surprise. He raised one eyebrow and looked at Elizabeth. How did you have to be pissed off to give up that much money? Speak matter-of-factly. Will you help me? Rubbing her hands together contentedly, Elizabeth was already imagining the worried and crying face of her sworn friend. I like the sum, but the idea is not. I'm sorry, Elizabeth, but I myself have a child growing up. True, I divorced my wife and my son stayed with his mother, but for my child, I'd tear anyone apart without a drop of regret. It was unexpected. Elizabeth pressed her lips, hummed, and threw down from above. You're a bastard, Jervis. I thought better of you. It was an inhuman effort to restrain herself from laughing in his wrinkled face. She could barely hide her contempt. Elizabeth grinned crookedly, sighed heavily, looked at the envelope and carefully placed it in her purse. What a nuisance. It's not a happy envelope, she said quietly. Elizabeth hurried home, clomping her high stilettos, and for some reason it seemed that Jervis, helping her carry her bags into the apartment, was looking at her incredulously, barely restraining himself from laughing in her face. Thank you, she said. You're welcome, replied the neighbor and waved goodbye and silently left the apartment. Hillary had literally run away from Osborne that evening. The mood was disgusting. For 6 years feelings had not disappeared, and even on the contrary became even stronger. The soul screamed and rebelled. Osborne was the only man in her life, and she was just another, and if it were not for his son, then perhaps Osborne would not have divorced his wife. These thoughts were tearing her apart. However, even realizing this, Hillary could not give up this relationship. Barry could not wait. When the son brought a test for alleged paternity, and there in black and white were put the numbers 99.9. He began to ask Osborne to show, introduced, brought to visit the only grandson. But Osborne resisted and began to prove that it was not time yet. Hillary was against it and would not allow it yet. And then Barry decided to act on his own. Without saying a word to anyone, he found out the address himself. He made the necessary inquiries and drove to his grandson's home. After dialing the apartment number, Barry leaned into the microphone and said affectionately, Hillary, it's Osborne's dad. Could you open the door for me, please? Come in, came the surprised voice of the future daughter-in-law. Hillary met Barry on the landing. Hello, is something wrong? She asked worriedly. I want to meet my grandson. How long can you keep the truth from your child? Hillary froze on the spot, swallowed loudly, and began to speak excitedly and unintelligibly. Butul. Yeah, don't know. Albert doesn't know yet. I haven't told him yet. I've explained it to Osborne. Now we're going to go over it with you, Hillary. Listen to me and do as I ask. How long do we have to wait? Let me at least see my grandson. Albert is 5 years old and Grandpa hasn't even seen him. Hillary, my friends are gonna laugh at me. Barry spoke loud and clear. He decided he'd only leave after meeting his only grandson. Come on in, she said in an unhappy voice. While Hillary went to fetch her son, Barry had time to meet his grandmother. He piled the presents from the bags onto the coffee table, but his grandmother just shook her head and shook her hands. Where are all these presents going? They wouldn't fit in the room. I can't go to my grandson's house empty-handed. I went to a children's store for the first time and my eyes went wild. What beautiful toys children have now. Barry stopped half speaking because he saw Albert. He stood modestly near Hillary and looked at the strange man in surprise. Hi, I'm your grandpa. Daddy will be here soon. I brought you some presents. Barry squatted down and held out his hand to Albert. "Mom, is this my grandfather?" Albert held out his hand incredulously and looked at Hillary. "Meet Albert, this is your grandfather," smiled Hillary at him. "Where's my daddy then?" The intercom buzzed. "Here comes Daddy," Barry said affectionately. All four of them went straight to the hallway. Hillary opened the door and let Osborne into the apartment. "Hillary, I had nothing to do with this. My father took the initiative. I didn't even know." Osborne looked at his father unhappily. "Uncle Osborne, are you my father?" He heard his son's voice. "Yes," Osborne said quietly. "Hooray!" Albert jumped up and hung around his father's neck. Osborne held Albert close to him and squeezed his eyes shut. Then he started kissing him randomly on his cheeks, on his forehead, on his nose. And I knew right away that Uncle Osborne was my daddy. Albert turned his head and looked at everyone with a satisfied smile on his face. Barry was wiping away a stingy male tear. Grandma was just sniffling, her tear-red eyes downcast. Hillary smiled at her son's delight. Osborne, too, could not help his feelings. He turned away from everyone to hold back the tears and not to cry himself. Osborne blinked often, still holding his son tightly in his arms. Albert wrapped his arms around his face, turned and looked up at his father. He smiled and began to wipe away his tears with the palm of his hand. "Daddy, don't cry. It's good that I have you." Albert clung to Osborne again. "Don't let them say I don't have a daddy now. I'll tell everyone at daycare tomorrow that I have my daddy back," Albert said in a serious tone, and Osborne smiled happily. "Albert, I love you more than anything in the world. If I'd only known I had you, I would have come much sooner." "Papa, you didn't leave Mommy and me, did you? You just didn't know I was born?" he asked in childlike surprise. "Of course, my darling." Osborne kissed him again. "How could I refuse such a wonderful son?" Osborne touched his nose with his index finger. "Are you going to live with us now?" They looked at each other in surprise, and Osborne looked questioningly at Hillary. "All that remains is to persuade your mother. I really want to live with you, but Mama's a little reluctant." "Mom, let Dad live with us. We'll all live together. Me, you, Grandma, and Dad. There'll be enough room for everyone. And Grandpa will come to visit us." Albert looked at Hillary and demanded an immediate and positive answer. "I'll think about it, son." Hillary answered his question with a heavy sigh. "Why live at Grandma's? Your dad has his own apartment." Barry put in his word. He was upset to the core and was ready to move his grandson and Hillary to his son's apartment right now. "Your son is still officially married," Hillary reminded him, and Barry bit his tongue, remembering that Hillary was right and he had a daughter-in-law. "Dad, can we go to the entertainment center again? And I'm going to Melvin's birthday party tomorrow, and I want you to take me, not Mom. I want everyone to see what a handsome daddy I have." Everyone laughed, and Osborne stroked his son's head. "Of course, son. We'll go to the movies and to the entertainment center, and tomorrow I'll take you to your friend's party with your mom." "No, alone. Mom will stay at home." "All right, I'll take you alone." Osborne agreed with a smile on his face. "Come in, dear guests. Why are we standing in the hallway?" The grandmother came to her senses, inviting the dear guests into the house. Osborne drove the car home and remembered how Hillary came to the landing to see him off. Instead of talking, Osborne took courage and immediately attracted her to him. His father turned away, and without waiting for the elevator, went down the stairs on foot, leaving them alone. "Are you crazy? What if the neighbors come out?" "No one is out. Not even a light bulb is on," Osborne said quietly, pressing Hillary even more tightly against him. "You're married," he heard his favorite woman whisper timidly. "Consider it not. Soon you and Albert will be my family. Our son needs a father. You see how happy he was when he found out I was his father." Osborne felt Hillary's resistance weaken slightly. He took advantage of that and pulled her even more tightly against his chest. He found her lips in the darkness and kissed them greedily. They kissed for 40 minutes, no less, until the elevator doors opened and the neighbor on the landing came out. Osborne could not get away from that kiss. He remembered it all the way home and the way Hillary had responded to him. Little by little droplets pulling out his loving heart. Osborne twisted his face and swore obscenely at the entire cabin. He sighed heavily when he saw a familiar silhouette in the darkness. There could be no mistake. Elizabeth was standing by her car, talking on the phone. When she saw Osborne, she quickly dropped the call and strode toward him. Hi, aren't you tired of driving all this way to see your son? She watched his reaction with a wry grin. Are you following me? No, why? Just asking. Elizabeth made a surprised face and shook her head. Why did you come again? It seems to me that you and I have already decided everything. I need to get something else. She explained calmly. I started to unpack and couldn't find some of my documents. Okay, let's go, but quickly. I'm very tired today. Osborne gave her a squeamish, scrutinizing look. He stopped abruptly as he said those words, deciding to postpone her visit until morning. He opened his mouth, but Elizabeth beat him to it. Don't worry, I won't keep you long. I'll take the documents and leave at once. Osborne looked at Elizabeth carefully again. He didn't want to believe her, but there was a strange uneasiness in his soul. What was the necessity of picking up the documents at the first hour of the night? What are you up to again? He grumbled unhappily. Why are you hurting me? Every action of mine you take in the bayonet. Why? Until Hillary came along, we were doing fine. Elizabeth raised her eyebrows in surprise. If you think you can come to me anytime you want, you are very deluded. You and I broke up and you don't have to come over late at night. I'm sorry, darling, but I don't want to take any more chances. Osborne stopped abruptly at the front door and turned to Elizabeth. What documents do you want? I'll have them delivered to your house tomorrow at your convenience. Are you afraid of me? By the way, I'm still a resident here, and just because I left voluntarily without making a scene doesn't mean I can't come back and get my stuff. I think I said in Russian that I'm tired and exhausted. Hosting is not on my agenda. I'm sorry. Osborne got his keys, opened the front door, turned his head. When he saw that Elizabeth wasn't going anywhere, he sighed defiantly and loudly. Elizabeth, where is your feminine pride? Don't you realize that I don't want to see you? You have already broken so much wood that I have never dreamed of. You'll have to repent your sins to Hillary and your son for a long time to come. Osborne opened the door and walked into the house. He turned around and blocked the entrance to the apartment. He looked at his ex-wife with a disgruntled look. There was no doubt in his mind that she was an ex-wife. You've gotten so rude. Osborne, where's your education? Since when did you become afraid of weak and defenseless women? It seems to me that you and I have always lived well and trusted each other. You don't even have the guts to part on good terms, like all civilized people. Elizabeth shrugged and grinned. You have everything, he thundered, beginning to lose his patience. Even water with fear will not offer, not to mention tea or coffee. I've waited so long for you. Osborne, I really need to see some paperwork, and I've missed you so much. Don't you realize you can't just put everything out of your mind? Unlike you, I loved you very much, and I still do. Understand? It's very hard for me. Osborne mentally raised his hands to the sky. He was really bloody tired. Nerves like bare wires, already just sparked. It was impossible to hold back the hurtful words and foul language. They were on his tongue and wanted to come out. I hope you understand me. Bye. Throw me the list of documents, Osborne said in a hoarse voice, closing the door in front of Elizabeth's nose. He sank tiredly onto the ottoman and listened to the sounds in the hallway. Only when the elevator doors slammed shut did Osborne exhale with relief and shut the second door. No, Mommy, I'm not going anywhere without Daddy. I've already told everyone that Daddy's bringing me. Do you want everyone to laugh at me and think I'm a liar? Albert crossed his arms over his chest, pouted his lips, sat down in his chair and turned away. Daddy will be here soon. Let's get dressed. Hillary reassured her son. Really? You're not lying to me? Really. Hillary shook her head. When she heard the ringing tone, she looked at the incoming number and smiled. Hillary, I'm on my way up. Come on out, she heard Osborne's long-awaited voice. Albert was the first to jump out of the building and shouted, Hurrah! He ran into his father's arms. What took you so long, Papa? I thought you weren't coming, didn't I? It just happened, son. I had to go to the tire shop. 2 flat tires. Osborne opened the passenger door. When he saw Hillary, he pulled her to him and kissed her on the cheek. I missed you, Osborne whispered in her ear. Hillary glanced at her son. But Albert was already sitting in the child seat and without paying attention to his parents, fastened his seatbelt. Hillary ran into her department just for a few minutes. Today she and her son are going to Osborne's parents. Hillary took this step just for the sake of her son. And Albert, of course, was put up to it by his dad. "Hello, Hillary." She heard a woman's voice behind her. "Hello, Elizabeth." Her heart thudded and drummed. Her mood immediately slipped to below zero. Although just a few minutes ago, Hillary wanted to sing and dance with joy. "Let's talk," Elizabeth hissed angrily. "I wonder what about? Don't we have anything to talk about? We have one husband for two, in case you've forgotten. I'm not married yet. But that doesn't stop you from sleeping with another man's husband." Elizabeth spoke loudly, almost shouting. "I'm not sleeping with Osborne. He's the father of my son. I can't forbid him from associating with Albert." Hillary shrugged his shoulders. "That's how you talk. You used to tell everyone it was just your son." Elizabeth grabbed Hillary's hair, wrapped it around her fist, and pulled sharply. "If I ever see her near my husband again, let me go." Hillary intercepted her hand, but Elizabeth held her hair tightly in her fist. Hillary cried out, tears welling up in her eyes. She and the saleswoman unlocked her arms, and the girl pulled Elizabeth aside. "Do you understand me? She's trash. If I see her with my husband, your illegitimate son will get one too. Decided to put your Mishenka in safe hands. I warned you," shouted at the whole floor Elizabeth. "I didn't expect you to be such a psychopath." Breathing deeply to calm her trembling, Hillary said. She didn't know where to hide her eyes in shame. "I warned you," Elizabeth replied and walked proudly out of the department. "Hillary, don't pay attention and don't be sad." Maria sat her down on the sofa and began to calm her down. "Think about it. If she was fine with her husband, would she have come to you with threats? She's probably tried all the remedies. Nothing worked. She decided to come to you, fighting over a man. It's the last thing you want to do. What's it got to do with you? Let her deal with her husband." "That's embarrassing." Hillary shook her head and bit her lower lip. "Now I'm going to call Osborne and refuse to meet his parents. I don't want anything. Why only Albert had been told about his father? We lived peacefully and without him. And now we have to feel like on top of a volcano." Hillary kept sniffing her nose and carefully wiped her tears. The upcoming trip to Osborne's parents seemed silly ridiculousness now. At the moment, Hillary was feeling very depressed. An inner voice kept telling her to pull herself together, to stop sulking and give up on her relationship with Osborne. Hillary took out her cell phone and dialed Osborne's number. But then, after a little brainstorming, she dropped the call and hot-footed it to the text message. Why did she have to listen to all this nonsense? I don't need his wife tracking me down and intimidating me. What right does she have to throw herself at me and call me obscene words? I have no one to protect me. And Elizabeth senses this and behaves as she sees fit. At the end, she wrote that we were not welcome to visit, and that Osborne should not come for a while. I need to think hard and sort myself out. She made a note that she didn't want such a relationship. Hillary released all her emotions and calmed down, realizing that if she and Osborne meet today, nothing good can be expected from this meeting. History repeats itself. Again, Elizabeth intrudes into their relationship. Last time she succeeded, she achieved her goal and married Osborne. Who knows, maybe it will work this time. Osborne will come to his senses and take the divorce petition. Having sent the message to its destination, Hillary turned off the phone and carelessly threw it into her handbag. Osborne reread the message from Hillary for the 10th time. He called several times, but the phone was unavailable. His mood had plummeted. He was 200% sure that he would persuade Hillary to stay with his son tonight. But Elizabeth had intervened again. The nascent fragility of the relationship was back to square one. Osborne pulled his cell phone out of his pocket. "Where are you now?" he shouted into the receiver. "I'm on my way to the house," Elizabeth answered in a calm tone. "I'll be right there." Osborne dropped the call and practically ran out of the office. He drove on autopilot to the house of Elizabeth's parents. Angry, he couldn't unbuckle his seatbelt for a long time. With eyes as red as a bull's, I jumped into her car and grabbed her by the throat. "I'm gonna strangle you, and I'm not gonna get hurt. You're the kind of bastard that can't be rehabilitated. Only death will reform you." Elizabeth stared in horror, and Osborne's hand gripped her throat tighter and tighter. She was desperately short of breath, and Osborne's face expressed absolute rage. He leaned in close to her ear and hissed angrily. "Ready to die?" A haunting thought flashed through her head. If she shook her head in agreement, he wouldn't hesitate to strangle her and wouldn't even flinch. Hire a good lawyer. But Elizabeth began to shake her head, showing her complete disagreement. Tears spurted from her eyes. Osborne grinned squeamishly and removed his hand. Elizabeth began to cough and breathe heavily. "Are you mad?" she hissed as she continued to gulp in air. "You need treatment. You almost strangled me. Did you want to go to jail?" "Almost doesn't count. Next time I'll strangle you if you go near Hillary or my son. This is your last warning. Don't take offense later. You'll be plotting your wickedness in the afterlife." "I'm not kidding." Osborne pointed his index finger at her. Elizabeth held her throat with one hand and wiped her nose in tears with the other. "I hope you understand me. I can't hear you?" Shouted Osborne to the whole salon and reached out to her throat again. "I do." Elizabeth tried to shout back through her tears, but she did not succeed. She looked at her ex-husband with undisguised disgust. "I will not repeat twice. My next actions will be tougher. The country is big. There is a lot of land." He opened the passenger door and without saying goodbye got out of the car. Elizabeth dropped her head on the steering wheel and cried. Hillary realized she had snapped. She couldn't stand it. She told Osborne everything that had boiled up in her soul. It had been 3 hours. She wanted to turn on the phone and have a quiet conversation. But pride and resentment, like a huge angry dog on a strict collar, did not allow her to make this step. Elizabeth's words about the illegitimate son, whom Hillary dreams of adopting. The most offensive thing is that it was Elizabeth who had a hand in this, and now reproaches. "I had to explain to Albert long and tediously that today to go and get acquainted with his grandmother will not be possible." She told him all sorts of nonsense just to keep him away and not to pester him with her questions, to which Hillary herself did not know the answers. Hillary had already bathed Albert and put him to bed. She tried again to answer his many questions honestly and without offense. The bell on the front door rang. Her heart shrank to the size of a small balloon. Her palms sweated and a chill ran down her spine. She went to the door and looked through the peephole. When she saw Osborne, she sighed heavily but opened the door. "Would you let me in?" He looked at her with guilty eyes. "Come in." Osborne went into the apartment and closed the door quietly, so as not to make any noise. Hillary closed her eyes. The anger had receded, but the thought that there was no future in their relationship lingered in her mind. "Why did you disconnect the phone?" Osborne whispered. He took Hillary by the shoulders, staring intently at her face and reading every micro movement from it. "I didn't want to talk to you. I was afraid I'd say something rude to you and then regret it." Hillary was still trying not to look at Osborne. "That's it?" He tucked a lock of hair behind her ear and then ran his fingertips gently over her cheek. "Hillary, how many times do you have to do this? Why don't you stop hiding from me and we'll work things out together? Don't you think I can't protect you? For the sake of you and Albert, I'm willing to go to the extreme. If she comes near you again, she'll be in trouble, I swear to you. I had a tough conversation with her today. I gave her a final Chinese warning. Do you believe me?" Osborne gently took her chin and forced her to look into his eyes. "I am afraid of her. Elizabeth is sick in the head, Osborne. You should have heard her calling our son names, screaming that I'm trying to force him on you. I can't imagine the eyes I'll be wearing to work tomorrow. I'm so ashamed." Hillary sniffled with resentment. "Remember, you have me now. Your troubles are my troubles. When we're together, we're safe from Elizabeth. I explained it to her today. I repent to you that I had to use a little force. But there's no other way to deal with her. She doesn't understand simple human words. I was afraid you'd grab our son and run away again." Osborne held Hillary close and kissed the top of her head. "When I got your message, I freaked out. I jumped in the car and raced to Elizabeth's. You don't want to know what happened between us. But take my word for it was not easy for her. I explained clearly that I would go to extreme measures. I hope she understood me and made the appropriate conclusions." Osborne continued. "Do you believe me?" Hillary nodded her head silently. Osborne sighed heavily and kissed her gently on the top of her head again. "Hillary, I won't leave you alone anymore. Let's decide something." Osborne looked at her expectantly. He was anxious for Hillary's immediate consent. Even his insides clenched into one big lump from nervous tension. Hillary stared at one point and bit her lips. Then she pulled away from Osborne and grinned crookedly. "What if it doesn't work out?" "I don't even think about it. We'll make it work. Don't you doubt it. I'm sure of it, and no one can change my mind," Osborne said in a confident tone. "Get a divorce first." She bit in where it hurt. "When you're divorced, then we'll talk. Right now, this conversation is inappropriate." Hillary broke free of his embrace. "Hillary, I'm warning you, I'm not going anywhere tonight. I'm already dreaming about this road at night." Osborne made a hurt face. "All right, I'll make up the couch for you. I hope Grandma won't mind," Hillary agreed. She held out her hand to him and they went into the kitchen together. "But first, I'll make you some tea." "Not a bad suggestion." Osborne smiled his charming smile. Elizabeth sobbed in the car, remembering all her worthless life. How she had fallen madly in love with her almost ex-husband, how she had pursued him, stepping on her own pride, but nothing good came of it. In the end, Elizabeth was left with nothing. Today, for the first time, she was frightened to see the hatred in her husband's eyes. Osborne defended his beloved Hillary with such unbelievable tenacity that Elizabeth was afraid for her life. She was not on a joke, chickened out, trying to get out of his strong hands. Osborne squeezed her throat so hard that Elizabeth was ready to say goodbye to her life. Who would have thought that this evening would end like this? If Elizabeth hadn't fought so desperately, she might not be alive anymore. In those short, tense minutes, her whole life flashed before her eyes like a movie. Realizing that she was on a hair's breadth from mortal danger, Elizabeth finally decided that she didn't need a man to hold her back. It is not worth wasting energy and time on a man who does not love you, and probably never did. At one time it seemed that her love is enough for two, and now they both suffered, Elizabeth from unrequited love, and Osborne from the fact that he still loved Hillary and has never felt something like that for his lawful wife. Soon they will be divorced, and it will all be over before it even begins. Having cried enough, Elizabeth consoled herself with the thought that she was still young. She has her whole life ahead of her. Perhaps when she calmed down, Elizabeth would meet a man who would really love her. She would have a child and live as well as Osborne. Elizabeth opened the door and stepped out of her car with determination. She looked around with a haggard look and red, tear-stained eyes. With shaking hands, she took the keys out of her purse and quickly dashed down the driveway. No more. From now on, she would learn to respect and appreciate herself. She was tired of being afraid of something, of lying and dodging, fawning over Osborne and his relatives, trying to please them to please. This no one appreciated and will never appreciate. A man cherishes a woman when he loves her. And Elizabeth Osborne has never loved and will never love. First of all, it is necessary to do everything to look worthy in the eyes of people around her. Do not look at how her former acquaintances and friends live. They have their own lives, and Elizabeth will have her own new life. It's going to be hard, it's going to be tough, but she's going to try. It's not a given that she'll succeed, but it's worth a try. Before moving Hillary and her son into her apartment, Osborne called a cleaning company and made sure that everything was shiny, and not even one small detail did not remind his beloved of his ex-wife. One room he hastily converted into a nursery, filled it with toys and games. He even bought some school supplies, just in case. However, when he showed Hillary his bachelor pad, he immediately said, if she is embarrassed by the fact that Osborne lived here not alone, but with Elizabeth, one word and Osborne will sell the apartment without a second thought, and with the proceeds they will buy another. For him, the main thing is that Hillary nothing embarrassed and did not remind of his past life. I don't care where to live. The main thing is with you and our son. His eyes sparkled with happiness, and the smile never left his face. Osborne gently stroked the still flat belly of his beloved woman and continued the thought in a tender voice. And with our future little princess. By the way, you've thought of a name for our daughter. We have plenty of time. Hillary waved it off. I want to name my daughter Lara. Is that okay with you? No way. Of course I mind. Hillary wrinkled her face in a grimace. Where did you find such an old-fashioned name? Let me take over this mission. You're not very good with names. You better do your job. Hillary replied in a serious tone. Maybe you're right. Osborne scratched his ear thoughtfully and looked guiltily at his wife. The evening promised to be unforgettable. Yesterday he and Hillary had married, and today she as his lawful wife is moving into his apartment. Osborne dreamed of a lavish wedding, with a veil, expensive beautiful dress, with a limousine. That champagne flowed, friends congratulated and drank to their health and family happiness. But Hillary flatly refused to celebrate. She agreed only to a modest wedding in the registry office and a dinner in the circle of the closest people. There is nothing to be done. The word of his beloved wife for Osborne the law, with relatives modestly sat in the restaurant. Grandfather and grandmother could not admire Albert and his favorite daughter-in-law. You're lucky to have a wife. What a wonderful grandson she gave us. And soon she will give birth to a granddaughter," whispered Barry in his son's ear and glowed from the happiness that fell on his head like a polished samovar. "We will thank her all our lives for the continuation of our family." Barry could not stop praising his daughter-in-law. What was the husband thinking about? Hillary rested her head on Osborne's shoulder. The word husband made him dizzy. At that moment, Osborne felt like the happiest man. He had sorted out all the problems related to his ex-wife. After that incident when Osborne almost took her life, Elizabeth lay low and didn't bother Hillary anymore. She kept a certain distance from Albert, did not bother them with his stupid and idle chatter. True, a couple of times called Osborne, but it was purely business calls and to his new family had nothing to do. Elizabeth, continuing to live with his parents, tried to meet with a man, but realized that this is not her man in terms of relationships.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.